So the Browns did make a roster move earlier today. They waived cornerback Chris Westry. Not a surprise. That position group is loaded. Cory, I know you have written an article kind of taking a look and making some educated predictions with the 53-man roster ahead of the final preseason game. What were the toughest positions to kind of gauge and figure out, and how did they fall in your look at it before the Chiefs matchup?
Yeah, so I think you got to start with the wide receiver room. Again, Austin Watkins, by every conceivable metric, is kind of kicking the door down and pleading his case. So I still don't think he's a lock to make the roster. And again, if he doesn't make the roster, I don't think it should be viewed as some egregious thing of how did this guy not make the roster. Again, it's his third year out of the draft, and he's never made an NFL roster. So he's playing deep into the fourth quarter of preseason games for a reason, and that's because the Browns are still evaluating him. So I do think he's still on the fringe. I think if they roster 7 wide receivers, though, that he gets a nod. Again, we still don't have Marquise Goodwin on the field, and he's going to probably stay on PUP as the regular season enters. I don't think he's making the roster over a guy like David Bell. I don't think he's making the roster over a guy like Jakeem Grant, who's an all-pro special teamer, all-pro return man. So people tend to think that those would be egregious mistakes not to roster him over those 2 players, but I think that's the nature of the beast, and there's a reason David Bell's only playing 3 offensive series. There's a reason that Jakeem Grant hasn't played in a preseason game despite practicing for 2 weeks. He will return some kicks and punts this week, but I think there have been, I guess, nods. There have been signs of how this wide receiver room is going to play out, and they haven't been all too subtle. Where, I think Austin Watkins probably deserves a spot, but I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't make it either. Running back is another position that's hard to sort out. One, because I don't think any of Demetric Felton, John Kelly Jr., or Hassan Hall have really risen to the occasion to grab that third running back role by its horns. Excuse me, to the point where Jordan Wilkins is probably going to get a healthy workload against the Chiefs to see what they have there, to the point where I think they could go out on the waiver wire and they could potentially find a running back that could get cut, like Dearness Johnson, who's been in the building the past 4 years, is listed as the 4th string running back for the Jaguars. If that guy gets cut, I'd be very interested in bringing him back as the running back 3. So I think running back, we're in a bit of a tough spot as well. And then I think safety room and linebacker room are 2 rooms where undrafted free agents are kind of making a little bit of noise. Right now, the linebacker room, they've historically rostered 5. I think your top 4 are pretty firm with Walker Jr., Takitaki, Owusu-Koramoah, and Tony Fields. Up to that 5th one, though, I think is between Matthew Adams and Mohamed Diabate. So Matthew Adams has a lot of special teams experience and rapport with Bubba Ventrone. He's known as a special teams ace, but he's been hurt all training camp. He hasn't played yet in the preseason. So it'll be interesting to see how they weigh that versus an undrafted free agent who also has a pretty large body of work in the preseason at special teams, who's also playing really well at the second level for a guy that this is only his 2nd season playing true off-ball linebacker after playing a lot of edge for Florida before transferring to Utah. And then safety room, coming down between D'Anthony Bell and Ronnie Hickman. And I think if it comes down to special teams and who brings more value on special teams, that D'Anthony Bell is going to get the nod. Ronnie Hickman's been showing quite a bit from single high looks, though, deep over the top, which is something he didn't have on his tape at Ohio State. At Ohio State, he was predominantly a box slot who looked like a liability when he was forced to turn and run and work over the top. So he's kind of added that to his skill set so far on tape in the preseason of being able to play single high, being able to play that deep third, and showing some range to make a play on the football deep down the field. So I think that's another interesting battle to see how it shakes out as well. But again, defensive tackle room has kind of worked itself out, I think. With Shelby Harris signing, with the emergence of Mo Hurst, I think that room has kind of worked itself out. And outside of that, there's not a lot of question marks on the roster.